For somebody who's looking to start doing what we have done, which is build a business around creating content on the internet, to me, the best way to do it is to find the platform that is most aligned with how you want to create content. So for you and I, we do a podcast. That means we enjoy talking to people, asking questions. We're curious. That's a great platform for you. It's a great platform for me. And we've kind of found that. We work within that. But for other people, it might be writing. Substack might be a great solution. Maybe it's Twitter. You're really good at short form content. So find the platform that's the best fit for you. Experiment with the things that you feel like you are best suited to sell.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Bjork Ostrom with us. Bjork is the Chief Tech Consultant, Business Advisor, Taste Tester at Pinch of Yum. Day to day, you'll mostly see him around Food Blogger Pro, as well as hosting the Food Blogger Pro podcast. Bjork is also husband to Lindsay, dad to Solvi and Lena, and lives in Minnesota with their dog Sage. And you can usually see him found with a coffee in hand. Bjork, it's so great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks. I actually still have a little bit of coffee. If anybody's listening, they can't see it, but it's like the 1 inch, it's an iced coffee. There's like the melted ice on top, but like technically I'm staying within kind of the bio line there, in that I do have a little bit of coffee here. Super excited to talk to you, and hopefully we can come away with some nuggets for the audience here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, first of all, I'd love to hear your origin story, your superhero origin story, because I'm sure you didn't just wake up one day and suddenly, Pinch of Yum and Food Blogger Pro were just there for you. There's some sort of origin story or a hero's journey there that brought you to where you're at now.
Yeah, totally. So kind of the quick story is I was working at a nonprofit here in Minnesota. My wife was a fourth grade teacher, and I have always been fascinated with creating things. Like in eighth grade, I went to did the Inventors Fair. I invented a wall where you could like plug it in anywhere on the wall. So I like made this thing. We called it the Wonder Wall. Had this vision, Oasis could have had the, background music for the commercial when it launched. But I've always at my core really loved the idea of creating things. And in that case, it was a physical thing. But in our case, with what we do now, it's a lot of digital things. And in 2010, I was working at a nonprofit. Lindsay was a teacher. And we're like, what's something that we could create? And Lindsay was really into recipe development. We had just recently been married, and so she was making food for both of us, which was a new thing for her. And she was posting content on Facebook at the time, just kind of casually. And I had just listened to Gary Vaynerchuk's. I had a 30-minute commute, and I would listen to podcasts and audiobooks. And I just randomly come across Gary Vaynerchuk had his first book. I think it was his first book called Crush It. In that book, he talks about this idea of, if you are really into worms, you can become like the go-to guy for all things worms on the internet, and you can make a career out of that. And so I thought, okay, if like you can do worming, you can probably do that with food. And researched it a little bit, and there was kind of two opinions. Some of the things that I read were like, hey, if you're going to create content on the internet about food, you're going to have to do it out of passion and joy, because you'll never make money from it. And then the other opinion was this kind of Gary Vaynerchuk crush it opinion around like, hey, you can kind of create a community and an income from anything online because you have the internet, you can access all those people. And so Lindsay and I kind of came together and said, what would it look like if we tried to build a thing, and that thing was content about food on the internet, to see if we could make money from it? So that was the origin story. Along the way, I would write articles and content talking about how we were earning income from the site, starting at like $20. That slowly grew over time, $40, $100, $1,000, $2,000, $10,000 a month. And as we were doing that, there was a lot of people who were already creating content or who were interested in creating content coming to us and saying like, hey, can you help us understand all the different kind of component parts that go into this? How do you start a WordPress site? How do you take good pictures? How do you, show up high on Google? And so from there, we launched Food Blogger Pro, which is a community of food creators who are all different genres and niches and diets and considerations, but all generally people who are trying to build and are, a lot of them doing it, at a really high level, building, scaling, growing food related sites. So we've been at it now for 14 years and continuing to learn every day and continuing to show up every day and publish content.
It's amazing. And are you bullish, optimistic about where things are heading in terms of AI and how much change we've seen just in recent months with Google and its algorithms? Or are you thinking maybe I need to be coming up with some other plan B?
Yeah, I'm bullish on the ability to create things online in the future. I would say I'm not bullish on that journey looking the exact same way that it has over the past decade for us. Like, there's just like zero chance that somebody is going to have the exact same journey as somebody who started in 2010. Like, it's just the landscape is so different. But in a lot of ways, it's easier because there's more people doing it today. There's more businesses paying for, working with a influencer, a creator, a brand today than there was 15, 14 years ago. So in that sense, I'm bullish. There's also probably more competition. So I think you have to be probably better than you would have been 10 years ago as a creator. Mm-hmm. But I would say, for somebody who's looking to start doing what we have done, which is build a business around creating content on the internet, to me, the best way to do it is to find the platform that is most aligned with how you want to create content. So for you and I, we do a podcast. That means we enjoy talking to people, asking questions. We're curious. That's a great platform for you. It's a great platform for me. And we've kind of found that. We work within that. But for other people, it might be writing. Substack might be a great solution. Maybe it's Twitter. You're really good at short form content. So find the platform that's the best fit for you. And then find I would say experiment with the things that you feel like you are best suited to sell. We know people who used to be teachers and they are really good at creating short form content that they post on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, like short form video content. And then they sell resources for teachers. Like, that's the thing that they sell. In our case, we do a podcast and we sell sponsorships against that podcast. So if you do Substack, you might sell a subscription. And so I think the opportunity is to discover the thing that you are really good at, the way that you want to create, and then to think about how do you want to sell against that attention that you're getting. Mm-hmm. I think you can still do it with a blog and you can get search traffic from that. I think the thing that I don't know about, and I'd actually be interested in your thoughts on it, is like that we're kind of walking this tightrope, it feels like. And the tightrope is like, on one side is how it's been, which is 10 blue links on a search result. On the other side, it's like Google AI answers or ChatGPT. I don't really know how that's going to all play out. And it feels like Google doesn't really know either. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the question is, if this is your first year getting into a thing, do you expend all of your effort like trying to show up high on search results as your main effort, knowing that there might be a switch that's flipped and Google now provides the majority of their answers in like a chat interface or Google AI answers overview? I don't see that in the foreseeable future, like 2-3 months, but maybe in 2-3 years, that will be the primary way that people get their information. That's where I would say I'm not bullish on that. I'm more curious, but I am bullish on the future of people to create a business online as a creator, selling things adjacent to the attention that they get by publishing things that they create online.
Yeah. My take on it is diversify your traffic sources and diversify your sources of income so that you are not overly reliant on one particular platform or tool or algorithm. And just relax and trust, because somebody as a man of faith, I believe that everything happens for us, not to us. Everything happens for a reason. So if we're meant to get disrupted by some big change in Google, then welcome it, because that's part of the divine plan.
Yeah. And I think, maybe like a little bit of a kind of a similar idea to what you're saying this is kind of a mindset that we've had just around decision making is like, you can try and make right decisions or you can make decisions right. And I think as people contemplate, what am I going to do? Like, what's my approach going to be? Where am I going to create content? I think a lot of it is to make the decision. Once you've made that decision, to stick with it and to not hop over to the next thing or to go somewhere else, like to really try and get good at a thing and understand it and spend time with it. And that to me feels like where the magic is, where like you are committed to becoming a musician, let's say, to use that as an analogy. The best way to do that is to get really good at understanding music, and then to also, in tandem with that, get really good at an instrument. But you might not know how that plays out. You might be a studio musician, you might be, a stage traveling musician, you might be a singer-songwriter. But if you are a good musician, there's going to be opportunities for you. And I think similarly, if you are a good creator, if you understand how to connect with people, if you understand how to discover what the needs are that people have and create content around that, that's where the opportunity is. Platforms will change, algorithms will change, but if you're committed to showing up every day and becoming an incredible musician, after a decade, you're going to get there. You have to have some inborn talent, I think, with any of this stuff. But if you really commit to it, you'll get there eventually. Where you'll end up being is more unknown. All of that stuff kind of changes very quickly in the world that we're in. But what doesn't change is people's desire to consume really good content and to connect with people.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like that's more of a mindset than it is a strategy or a set of tactics.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's this balance in the world that we're in where it's like, you need to have a mindset that allows you to show up. Our parent company is called TinyBit, and TinyBit is all about getting a tiny bit better every day forever. Like that's what we're about. That's why we're still, 14 years later showing up, doing this. I'm doing a podcast interview after this, just before we had a team meeting, like still in the weeds of what we're doing, trying to get a tiny bit better. That's very much mindset. Like, what does it look like to do this for a long period of time? And I think most people underestimate the amount of time that it takes. Not always. Like sometimes you can have a viral video and that kicks off, your next decade of success. But for the most part, it's really hard work. So that's a mindset. But within that, you also need to know the tactics. Like to use the music example, like you need to know how to, like, if you have a saxophone, like the appropriate way to like get your saxophone reed ready before you play, or how to read notes and, what different keys are. And in our world, you also need to know best practices around, the world of SEO really well. And so, there's a lot of tactics in the world of search that are really important. You also have to have really good content that people resonate with, but there's a lot of tactics and best practices that you need to understand in order to be successful. And it's really, I think, the balance or the marriage of those two things that will allow you as a creator to be successful.
Yeah. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So what sort of strategy or process or system do you have for choosing content or identifying content that resonates with your core audience? And then how do you make it more viral, more appealing, even more so, and also to the search engines?
Yep. In a lot of how I can speak from Lindsay's shoes here, because the type of content she's creating is more like consumer-based content. We're doing B2B content with Food Blogger Pro, where it's like we're talking to other bloggers or creators. She's creating content, that's more consumer-based content, so people who are actually going cooking recipes. But I think that's the easiest way to talk about it. So she views a lot of what she's doing right now as she is a marketer for the free content that she's creating. Like the relationship that she has with the content is not like I'm creating content that will eventually, sell a membership like we would with Food Blogger Pro. She's looking at, I have, on Instagram, 1.4 million followers, and I am marketing this recipe to this audience. And I think the first thing that you need to have is like an actual product that is good. And I think sometimes people will be creating a thing and they market that thing both in B2B or B2C, but it's not actually a good product. So that's where you have to start. You have to have a really compelling, a really good product. And for Lindsay, that starts with a lot of recipe development. It starts with a lot of interacting with her audience to get an understanding of what they need and what they're interested in. It's kind of product development. And she spends a lot of time refining the recipe. But then she also, similar to like a big movie release, spends a lot of time building up to when she'll eventually publish that recipe. And so she'll spend time talking to her audience, showcasing along the way, talking about how much she loves a certain recipe. So then when she does launch, similar to like the first day that a new Star Wars movie comes out, you have people who are really excited to see it and interact with it. And so I think from a marketing standpoint, if you are a content creator who is creating content that is monetized via ads or sponsorships, you need to think of yourself as a marketer for that content. A lot of us think of creating content as the marketing for the eventual product that we're going to sell. But for some people, it is the content that they're selling. So that's just a little bit of a mindset piece to understand where you are. Like, are you somebody who's creating content as the product, or is the content something that will eventually lead to another product? I think in terms of like the actual tactics of what we look at and the considerations that we need to make from like in the case of Pitch of Yum, from a SEO perspective, it's any of the considerations that you'd have, within any of the books that you write around best practices. And none of those are too complicated in theory, but what's hard to do is to set up a system that you are accountable to that keeps you coming back to those best practices. So for us, we think a lot about internal linking. So do we have links on our site that cross link other pieces of content on our website? So if we have a air fryer chicken recipe, is that linked on other pages of the site really strategically in an organic way? That would be an example. Another example is really skimmable, easy to read content. And we do that with intentional structuring of headers. So you have like a H1, H2, H3, much like you would if you're writing a paper for a college class in Microsoft Word. You do that same thing within an article that you're publishing to a blog post. We want to make sure that we have all of the core web vitals, which are indicators that Google has around like what a healthy website looks like, that all of those are in check. And for any of you that haven't done that, it's really important to set up Google Search Console, which is this free tool from Google that gives you insight into how Google views your site, what keywords people are using to find your site, where there are issues. It's kind of like a dashboard that you can look at and get an understanding of all things Google. It pairs really well with Google Analytics. So there's all of these kind of best practices that we are looking at pretty consistently, but it's important that we pair those with content that people actually want and that they're interested in, which is when that marketing piece comes in, and it's really getting people excited about it and making sure that it's a good product itself.
Yeah. So Google Search Console is a great tool. And for our listener who's already, set up with it, what would you tell them are some of the low-hanging fruits and the actionable insights that you can glean from using Google Search Console, and maybe give some examples that were helpful for your business?
Yeah, for sure. So what you'll see depends a little bit on how your site is set up and like what information you have within your site. But it's broken out into different areas. One of the areas that's interesting to see just right off the bat is this area under performance called search results. And what you can see when you go into that area is an overview of a certain time period. So like, I think it defaults to this, but you can see like over the last 3 months, show me information for my site on search results. And so you can see the total number of clicks to your site. You can see total impressions. You can see the average click-through rate. So like how many times the impressions would be, how many times does somebody see your site on a search results page? And then how many times do people click on it? Click-through rate then is the total clicks divided by total impressions. But where it's really interesting is if you scroll down in that area, you can see the top queries. So where are people, what are the terms that people are typing in to actually get to your site? So for Pinch of Yum, like when we look at it, it's chocolate chip cookie recipe, pasta salad recipe, air fryer chicken breast. These are all really important queries for us because they bring a lot of traffic. But, if we look at foodbloggerpro.com, which gets a lot less traffic, it'll be things like the self-branded Food Blogger Pro, recipe sharing website, food photography tips, like the Food Blogger Pro podcast. So it just gives you a little bit of an overview of like, how are you getting people to your website via Google? The other area that would be important to point out, that core web vitals area that I mentioned before. That's under an area within Google Search Console called Experience. And if you click on core web vitals, you can see the grade that Google is giving you for the mobile experience of your website and the desktop experience of your website. And for anybody who's in the world of search, they know this well, so it's not going to be new information. But for anybody who's not in the world of search, this would be a good area to look at to see like, hey, it literally will tell you this needs improvement, this is poor, or this is good. And these probably aren't going to be things that somebody who's non-technical is going to fix on their own, but it would be a good thing to look at and to loop somebody in on who is technical to help with it. An example is we have a friend who has he's the director of a summer camp for kids, and I pulled up his site the other day and it was like not mobile friendly. And I was like, okay, I have to have a conversation with him around getting this set up in a way where, your website is mobile friendly. So that's like a really obvious example of low hanging fruit. One more that's just kind of interesting to see is the performance of a certain keyword or query over time. And so, when we were talking about it before, you can go into Google Search Console and you can see, the top performing pieces of content. But if you want, you can look at a query level. Like you can look at a specific query and you can see how that has performed over time in terms of where it's ranked. And that's really interesting to keep an eye on that, or really important to keep an eye on that, because if you have a keyword or a query that people are using that's really important, and then you notice that drops, the average position of that drops, then what you need to do is start to look at how can you get that back up in search results. And so that would be the other thing that you could explore and pay attention to within Google Search Console, is keeping an eye on the position of those most important keywords for you.
Right. And so that's where, let's say, your interlinking might come into play, where if you haven't already interlinked pages that are about that topic, you're trying to get the top performing page that you have on the site for that particular keyword to rank higher because it's dropped over time, then you can make some adjustments in terms of how you interlink and get that page inheriting more link equity.
Yeah, even build like a little bit of a marketing playbook for your content. And that playbook could include strategic interlinking. It could include, in our case, we have a newsletter. And so maybe if we see something starting to drop, we could say, hey, we want to bring some attention to this. We want to share it with people, knowing that a lot of times if you share something, people will then share that with their friends, or they might link to it. You can think about mentioning it on social. Maybe you could revisit it and see if that specific page is lacking information, and you could add information if it needed more. So you could kind of develop, your own, we think of it almost as like a car wash, where like if one of these queries gets a little bit dirty, like what do we do to bring it through the car wash? And there's, anybody who's gone through a long car wash knows that there's like those, 7 different things that, you can pay for the full car wash, and it gives you the wax and the dry and all of that. And similarly, if you notice, a keyword starting to drop or not perform as well, or a certain page not perform as well, you could look at it and say like, okay, what are the 7 different things, the 7 different options that I have in front of me that could allow me to say like, to shine a little spotlight on it or just clean it up, that will potentially allow it to perform better. And if you start to do that and you repeat that over time, you'll start to understand the impact that some of those things can have. And as much as possible, it's nice to do those in isolation, so you can see, does this have an impact? Does it not have an impact? We've been using a tool called SEO testing, and it's not perfect, but it allows you to get a little bit of an idea of like, okay, if we're going to make this change, let's see a before and after analysis of like the date when we made this change, and did the position increase? Did the click-through increase? Another thing you could do is you could look at the description for the article or the blog post, and you could edit and improve that. Google doesn't always take that meta description, but oftentimes it will pull that in. And if it's a compelling meta description, that might increase the click-through rate. So there's a lot of things that you can do if you do notice that start to drop, but those are just a few of the approaches that we take.
Yeah, awesome. And it's really simple to start digging into this stuff. And Google Search Console, like you said, go to the performance option there, and then you'll see that you can tick those 2 like squares that show the CTR and the average position, and then you see that on the chart below. Each of those 2 metrics. And then you can pick under the section for, let's say, the queries that are the top queries, pick one of those queries, and then that becomes part of the filter options. So now you're seeing data only for that particular query. It's that simple. Or conversely, you go to the landing pages list, and then you pick one of those landing pages. And as you said, for your example, on Pinch of Yum, the air fryer chicken recipe that is performing really well might be one of those landing pages that performs quite well on your overall list. So you click that, and that will make that the filter option for showing all the keywords, all the queries that bring in traffic to that particular page, and then you can start dialing in on a page by page level. So it's very actionable.
Very actionable. There's also some like red flag, like mega red flag areas that you could check out. We had somebody that we knew who once had what's called a manual action, where it's like Google essentially putting a big red X over your site. And I think she had like unsubscribed from emails, and so she didn't know. And so it wasn't until she had gone into Google Search Console and clicked on manual actions area that she was like, oh my gosh, like this is why suddenly I don't have any traffic. Similarly, there's an area called security issues, and those are just like a direct letter from Google saying this is an issue that you need to fix, and it can have a huge impact on your site. Last thing I'll mention is there's also structured data. And we don't have to dive deep into that, but Google Search Console will also give you information into the structured data that it's seeing on your site and opportunities that you have to improve that, change that, adjust how it's showing up. Like for us, the big one is recipes. And so we have code on our site that helps. It's kind of like I think of it like a garage sale. So you could have a garage sale and put no signage out, and people might come to it and realize like, oh, this is a garage sale. Now I understand. I'm going to come and shop at this garage sale. But it's much more effective if you like put a big sign out that says garage sale. And similarly with a blog post or an article, you can put a sign out for Google or other search engines that tells them what the content is. So when they come and crawl your site, they don't have to infer or like understand, hey, it looks like this might be a recipe. you just have that sign, and that sign is represented as code within your site. People don't necessarily see it, but it's coded within your site. And they look at it and say, oh, I see this as a recipe, or, oh, I see this as a comment or an FAQ section or a video. And so it's really important that everybody understands what structured data would be for the type of content that you're creating. It's different for every piece of content. So recipes versus like, product review versus like movie theater times, like all of that information is structured data that shows up as code behind your site, but it's really important to get that right as well.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And there's lots of different aspects of this structured data. So a blog post has different structured data on it than, let's say, the homepage or the about page versus a product page. So you have structured data for products, which might have stock availability, price, the different parameters or options like colors and all that sort of stuff, sizes. But for a blog post, you've got article type information that's being put into the structured data markup, and then for an about page, you'd have like organization markup or the author markup. Like this is a person, this is a company and our corporation, and here's perhaps the URLs of their social profiles, their Wikipedia article, the various other profiles that they have, maybe on about.me or bloomberg.com, et cetera. And this helps your not just your page rank higher, but it also gives a lot more clear signals to Google about the elements of data that you have for the knowledge graph. So you're more likely to get knowledge panels and things like that for your brand, for your name, for your company, et cetera. So,
and Google has a great resource. If anybody were just to Google introduction to structured data, Google, like including Google in the Google search, they have this great article that kind of gives you an overview. They actually use, I think, recipes as an example of, and they show you the code, what it looks like, and then how they take that code and interpret it in the search result. And like you said, including that in your article can help create a more compelling search result that encourages people to click on it and interact with it. So, and all of that is like the technical component of what we do. But then there's also the reality of like the actual product itself, the content has to be good, it has to be helpful. And so that's where it's a little bit of the art and science of what exists within the world of SEO, which you know that well.
Right. And speaking of the art of it, like creating that curiosity gap for, I'm not talking about clickbaiting, but doing something that you're actually under promising and over delivering, not the other way around, so that it's not clickbait, but it actually is super compelling. It creates that curiosity for the searcher, and they're more inclined to click on it because they're genuinely curious about what the answer is. So how do you incorporate curiosity?
Yes, for sure. And I think it's curiosity, and also just like, as an example, we're naturally more inclined to click on an image than we are just text. And so if you have, like in our world, in the world of recipes, a search result can have an image, and it's going to be much more compelling for somebody if they can see an image of a chocolate chip cookie versus just like seeing the text. I think of, back to the days when I would wholesale shoes and sell them on eBay, and you'd have to pay extra for certain things, like to have bolded text, you'd have to pay extra, or to have like stars, you'd have to pay extra, or to have an image, I don't remember, but I think you'd have to pay extra. The nice thing in the world of search is like you don't have to pay extra for it. If it's organic search, you just have to make sure that you're structuring your content correctly. And if you do that, then you get these little bonus features that's going to make it more compelling. But also, to your point, like creating a title that is intriguing for people as well, that draws people in. I feel like YouTube, you see this a lot, people being really strategic about structuring a YouTube title to encourage people to click, but it only works if people then click and the video itself is really engaging. Like
Right.
I think of Casey Neistat as a YouTube creator, and he is good at both creating really compelling, titles for his YouTube videos, but he's also really good at creating a video that once you start watching, you don't want to stop watching.
Right. I love his do what you can't. You know that video he did? That's amazing.
Yeah, he has, whether it's these and thumbnail again is important for that. Like whether it's these kind of outlandish things that he's doing, like snowboarding down the streets of New York behind a car, or kind of these intriguing, compelling titles where you're like, what is that? I want to learn more about it. And you get into it and then you keep watching it. That feels like where, the magic really, really is.
Yeah, I'll tell you, just in the thumbnails, there's so much science to that. Just like, I forget what the stat was that I heard from an interview with, I think it's Mr. Beast, his dedicated thumbnail expert or whatever, who makes a lot of money. Like it's 7 figures a year or something. Like it's crazy. And what they spent per thumbnail to create was many, many thousands of dollars. I forget how much. It's like, wow.
You look at it and there's like 20 iterations and and testing and changing. And yeah, for sure. You realize, again, it's like the art and science of content. That's like they go through kind of a scientific method to come up with the best thumbnail that's going to perform for this video that they've already spent probably $1 million just to create the video itself.
And to have the right tools, like for example, TubeBuddy is allow you to A/B split test the thumbnails and see which ones are the winners. So that's part of the science part. If you're not using the proper tools for the job, then you're just kind of guessing or, I don't know, winging it as you go along.
Yep. That's great.
Yeah. Speaking of testing and figuring out what works and what doesn't, I noticed on the Pinch of Yum site that let's take the air fryer chicken breast recipe. The only thing that stays on the right hand side is an ad. And I'm curious how you came to that conclusion that only the ad should be sticky and everything else, like the follow us and subscribe to our newsletter and all that, scrolls away.
Yeah. So desktop version. So if anybody were to go to a Pinch of Yum recipe, you scroll through, eventually you get to the end of the right-hand sidebar. As you continue scrolling, the ad will stick. So just some background context around why that's happening. So for those who aren't familiar with the ad industry or ad world, like those will refresh. And so whenever those refresh, it's a new impression on a new ad. So part of it is, us, the primary way that we're earning money from Pinch of Yum is through advertising. And so that's when we think of optimization, we're thinking of optimizing to get more people to the site. And then when we have people to the site, optimizing around an ad experience that is like optimal meaning like it earns well, but it also isn't, completely crushing in terms of the amount of ads. Yeah. And where we are, we're actually, and if anybody goes to Pinch of Yum, we can kind of get a feel for it. We're within the advertiser that we work with in the lower quartile in terms of like number of ads that we run. And I would estimate that we leave like $10 to $20 of RPM being like, how much are you earning per 1,000, page views that people have on your site? We're leaving $10 to $20 on the table. So for us, it would equate to, hundreds of thousands or more of money that we're leaving on the table. But it's not just like leaving that on the table. Our bet is like that it's better to have an experience that people will want to come back to than it is to try and maximize every single impression with earning as much as you can. And
Yeah.
it still is like, there you go to it and it's like there's ads on the site throughout. There's like a lower third ad, there's a video ad that will play, there's ads that stick on the sidebar. So the simple answer is like that sticks there because that's our primary mechanism for monetization. I think if it was email, like an email is really important to us, we would have that there. Or if like we were primarily earning through Instagram sponsored content relationships, we'd have that there. We do earn through those, but like it's not the primary way that we are earning income for Pinch of Yum specifically. Another example would be if we've done product sales in the past, we've done meal plans, and those have been successful, but not to the degree that like running ads on the site is. If we were to like start today, that would probably look different. Like I think we would probably focus on a newsletter. We would think about Substack. We'd have a sponsorship. We'd probably look to start within a niche community, meaning people like, for us, it would be like families with kids under 5 and 2 working parents, and how to put meals on the table consistently, like homemade meals. That would probably be the product that we would look at. If that's what we were doing today, we'd shift what the focus would be. But it's just like for us, the primary mechanism is ads. And so the reason that we have that stick there is just because that's the most valuable thing. I think your idea is actually a really good one to like potentially look at adding something in addition to that, email sign up or like follow buttons. It's actually a really good idea. So making a mental note to myself to like maybe include an additional box that is along with that ad on desktop that then scrolls along with it, some type of prompt. So
yeah, I was just talking with my friend Greg Merrilees, who was a guest on this show multiple times, founder of Studio One Design, and he showed me a really cool implementation of this. It's on zing.coach. If you go to their fitness library, which is their blog, you'll see that their call out to try the Zing platform is sticky on the right-hand side of each blog post, but also on the left-hand side, there's like this table of contents of like in this article, there's this, and this, and it's sticky, and you can jump to the different sections just by clicking on that. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love that. The one thing that we're always kind of thinking through is, I would say it's probably like 80% of our traffic now is mobile. And so we're kind of balancing this world of like desktop versus mobile optimization. But it still is like hundreds of thousands of people that would be on desktop. And, that the incremental lift that you get from follows and email subscribers, I think can go a long way. I really like that implementation a lot. I'm looking at it right now and see we've been building in that table of contents at the top of a page, and people can click to go through it.
Yeah, but then you lose it when you scroll away. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's really slick to have that on the side. That's cool.
So we were talking about advertising, and that's the main form of income for you guys for the Pinch of Yum. Are you finding one particular like partnership to be the most lucrative? Like, is it Mediavine, Raptive, formerly AdThrive? Is it Freestar? Like, who did you end up partnering with, and why?
Yep, we've had a longstanding relationship with AdThrive, now Raptive. We know lots of people who use Mediavine. I'm not familiar with the third one that you shared.
Yeah, Freestar. Mm-hmm.
Freestar. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've worked with Raptive for a really long time, and in our world, there's a lot of people who bounce back and forth, different platforms, ad networks, but for us, a huge part of how we think through things, whether it be like hosting, team members, like vendors, advertising partners, is like we have a good working relationship. We're not going to try and like squeeze every little incremental benefit out. Like, hey, you could earn $5 RPM, $10 RPM more over here. What we've seen happen a lot is you do that, you move to a new thing, and then it's like those same conversations are happening where you are on one side. And so then you shift back over to the other thing. Oh, this host is the best. And it's not to say that you should never change or never look at other opportunities. We're just really slow to do that. And so we've worked with AdThrive, now Raptive, for I don't know how long, 6, 7, 8 years.
Gotcha.
And they've been a great partner.
Yeah. You know the old adage, hire slow, fire fast, right? So,
yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah. And we, in our world, it's like, I think there's the reality of switching costs. Like, when it comes to whether it's changing hosts or ad platform or team members. And so definitely if you have a situation where it's like not working out, do you want to look at another opportunity? Yeah, for sure. But we're not looking to kind of squeeze every incremental dollar out of a situation, especially if we don't know for sure if that's going to play out that way. So with the ad partners, we've had a great relationship with Raptive.
Recently, I was interviewing for the second time Chris Parker, who's the founder of whatismyipaddress.com. So they've been a client for like 7 or 8 years now already. And they've just recently hit a new milestone of 12 million unique visits a month.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Is there the main way they're monetizing is through ads?
It is, but they get quite a lot of revenue from affiliate relationships as well. So VPN providers and different kinds of anti-scam solutions and things like that. Mm-hmm. And years ago, I introduced him to Freestar, and he's been really happy with them. They've been really a pivotal kind of key part of his business. So yeah, he's very happy with them. So anyways, but what I was
and I see, like, even when I pull it up, I see Food 52 is a client of Freestar. So kind of in our world.
Yeah. So, I agree that, it's not, there are switching costs involved and so forth, but, it can be quite beneficial if your intuition tells you like, hey, maybe this is time to start looking around, or maybe this is the right new provider. I wouldn't ignore that.
Yep. No, that's great. And even if nothing else, I've learned this, just in the world of, like, you talk about diversification. And one of the ways we've done that is we just have some commercial real estate investments, like very much so diversifying outside of the world of, digital businesses. But as we go through the process of doing different projects with those buildings, one of the things that's amazing is, like, when you go out and get quotes, it's like $2,000, it's $5,000, it's $10,000, all for the same job. And within that, there's some considerations you need to make around, like, what's the level of service? What are the opportunities that you have, with an ad network? It's like, how are they going to serve you? And what are the opportunities that they have above just like programmatic ads? But also, a lot of times what you can do is you can go out and shop and just get a general idea of, like, how broad is the spectrum of, like, what could I be earning if it's an ad network, or what would I be paying if it's a vendor? And a lot of times that can be a pretty big spectrum. Like, you could potentially be making a lot more, or, in the case of spending, you could potentially be saving or spending a lot more depending on what the project is, who the vendor is. So at the very least, I think it's helpful to go out and at least look at the options that are out there. And I wasn't familiar with Freestar. I just made a note to check it out.
Happy to intro you if you're interested.
That's great.
Okay. So I'm curious to hear who your favorite guest of your podcast has been and why. And first, maybe preface this by saying how many guests you've interviewed over these years.
Yeah, I think we're in the 450s now with the podcast, which is crazy. 470, I think, is the one that we just launched. So how many episodes have you done? I know you have 2 podcasts, so.
Yeah, so across the 2 shows, it's over 1,000 people. Yeah, it's not crazy. I'm actually almost a year ahead on my personal development show on Get Yourself Optimized. 8 months, 9 months is how much I have already pre-recorded, and it's just sitting in the queue.
Yeah, that's incredible. Would you ever change the frequency of that? Like, so you're publishing them more frequently?
I've thought about it, but this goes back to something I mentioned just a couple minutes ago. If your intuition tells you go for it, then do it. But my intuition's telling me no, do not increase the frequency. But instead, I'm taking about 4 months off from podcast interviews, at least for that show, and probably more also for this show too, so I can have the nice 4-month break without worrying about running low on episodes.
Totally. I think the episodes that really resonate with our audience and ones that I appreciate are anytime that you can get really specific on a specific platform. So we have experts within our community. Casey Marquis is an SEO expert who speaks specifically to the kind of food community. Anytime he comes on, people are really interested in that. We have an expert in our community named Kate All, and she's an expert within Pinterest and really understands the world of Pinterest. And I just always appreciate her insights. We've had a couple interviews with Paul Bannister, who oversees some of the technical kind of considerations and state of the industry type stuff with ads, and he's with Raptive. I'm trying to think. The other ones that I appreciate and that are always interesting are when creators come on and share really specific stories. Like we had an interview with somebody named Sarah Cook, and she talked about building her site from 17,000 page views to 600,000 page views, and just kind of chronicled her journey through that process. So anytime that somebody can come on and share a specific story is interesting. And then the last one I'll share is I have a friend here in the Twin Cities area who started a company called Quiet Light Brokerage, and his name is Mark Doust. And he just talks about valuing your business and buying and selling websites. And I think from that there was kind of this realization within the food community of like, oh, I have a valuable asset, I can sell it. And I think a lot of people, it wasn't necessarily through that singular podcast, but what we saw was like, there was a handful of people who have transacted with Quiet Light and sold their site or bought sites. And the thing that I appreciate about that is this reminder that what we're doing is building a valuable asset. Like it's not just a job. It's not just, this thing that pays the bills. It's also a business. And that business, much like you could go out and buy Apple stock, and that creates a market cap for Apple. Like we have these things that we are creating that are inherently valuable. And I think it's important. I feel like it's important for me to remind people of that it's not just the income that you're earning from the thing that you're building. It's also the collective value that represents. And that a lot of times can be life-changing for people if you spend 10 years building a thing that has substantial cash flow. That represents a really valuable asset that can be sold on the marketplace. And so that interview with Mark was a good one. And also his kind of partner, Joe Valley. So
speaking of selling businesses, I don't know if you knew this, but Pat Flynn, he not only is, smart passive income, really amazing, very large podcast, but he also had food trucker without the .com. And he sold that in 2020. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, sure. Yep. And I'm friends with Matthew Gartland, who's the CEO of SPI Community, and was on a call with the two of them. I don't know, maybe it was like 6 months ago or so, just kind of chatting about a few things. But yeah, that's like a really great example of a business that's created, that has cash flow, that is valuable, that then you can take and sell in the marketplace. And so we've seen food sites, listed and sold for like 5 million, 10 million. Like that's uncommon, but it's not impossible. And so as we're thinking about this, it's a good reminder for people to say like, hey, you're building a valuable thing in the world that can be life-changing.
It's not just income. You're building an asset.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's a good thought to end on. So, if our listener is interested in learning more from you, maybe checking out your podcast and becoming part of the community that you've created, or even just getting a recipe, where should we send them to?
Yeah, thanks. The three areas that you could check out, one is pinchofyum.com. That's the food site that we've talked about. Foodbloggerpro.com. That's where we have information about our podcast and the membership. And then we also have a food, or it's not food specific. It's just like for anybody publishing online, a software tool called Clarity, CLARITI.com. And that actually brings in Google Analytics, Google Search Console, and WordPress data. So all of those things that we had talked about, it brings them all into one central hub. And so that's the software tool that we've been working on. So those are the three things that we're up to online and where you can follow along with us.
Awesome. Well, Bjork, that was really great, interesting, and value-packed episode. Thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you, listener, for being part of my tribe. And we'll catch you on the next episode. And in the meantime, have a fantastic week. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.